Good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar, Ask the Expert, Finding Clinical Trials, brought to you in part by Boston Medical, Bayer, Genentech, Taiho Oncology, and Smart Patients. My name is Kevin Bergeson, and I am a Programs Manager for the Colon Cancer Alliance. And on behalf of the patient and family support team and the entire Colon Cancer Alliance family, I'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening. Tonight's webinar will discuss the myths and realities of clinical trials and how the new Colon Cancer Alliance Clinical Trial Finder may help you find a clinical trial. We will also hear from a survivor and hear her story about participating in multiple trials. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and all registrants and attendees will receive a link tomorrow evening to where we have posted the webinar recording online. I would also remind everyone that neither the Colon Cancer Alliance nor our presenters are giving medical advice and that no doctor-patient relationship is intended or established. You should always seek in-person medical advice and make medical decisions together with your individual clinician team. To get things started, it's my pleasure to introduce the CEO of the Colon Cancer Alliance, Michael Sapienza, and Patrice Brown, Senior Director Program Development for the Colon Cancer Alliance. Welcome, Michael and Patrice.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Michael Sapienza here. I'm very happy for all of you to join us this evening. Just want to quickly talk a little bit about our mission and what our goals are around our three programs. So number one, what do we want to do with research? Why are we on this webinar this evening? Well, it's to increase the number of folks that are on clinical trials. So, what we say is by year 2021 that we want to have invested $10 million in cutting edge research. So whether we're talking about finding out why folks are being diagnosed more, why there's the rising incidence for young adults with colorectal cancer, or whether we're talking about the immunotherapy and figuring out how MSS patients could potentially benefit from chemotherapy or immunotherapy. And then our second program is our patient family support program. Our goal is to double the number of patients that we serve over the next 5 years. As most of you know, we have two amazing communities, Blue Hope Nation and Colon Town, and lots of you are probably involved in either one or both, and there's lots of conversations about clinical trials. In addition, we have our live chats, our scheduled chats. We have our monthly webinar series, including the one that you're on this evening. We're looking forward to an incredible immuno-oncology series that we're going to be launching very soon as well. And then our third program is our prevention and awareness program, and our goal is to save 100,000 lives by year 2021. And I'll tell you a little story. There's a gentleman that lives in New Jersey. His name is Lee, and unfortunately he lost his wife last year at age 47 to colorectal cancer. And he's kind of made it his life mission to partner with the Colon Cancer Alliance to kind of make sure that we are spearheading as much prevention as we can across the country. So our first place of business is going to be in Philadelphia. We're launching that program from awareness and prevention standpoint this fall, and we're excited to lead the effort at the Colon Cancer Alliance to make this disease absolutely preventable. So as you can see on your screen, we believe colorectal cancer is a senseless killer that must be stopped. Our mission is to empower a nation of advocates who work with us to offer support for patients, raise awareness of preventative measures, and inspire efforts to fund critical research. Together, we can end colon cancer within our lifetime. And our mantra, our brand mantra, is tomorrow can't wait. And we truly believe that here at the Colon Cancer Alliance, that each and every one of you are so incredibly important to everything we do. And this is why the Clinical Trial Finder has been such a great program that we're launching. And I'm going to pass it over to my incredible colleague, Patrice Brown, to talk a little bit more about our programs.
Thank you, Michael. So as you just heard Michael mention, part of our mission is to make sure that we are touching our community in ways that will be impactful. And when we look at what we've done in 2016, all of the touch points that we've had across the community, you'll see that these numbers speak volumes. So in 2016, we had almost 2,500 attendees at webinars. We had over 83,000 touch points through our patient and family support. And we have over 11,000 online members of our communities. In addition, we've had over 13,000 people call our helpline, and we're very proud of the symposiums and conferences that we put on. And last year we had over 152 people attend our symposium. And what does all of this mean? All of this means that we are touching our community in ways that make sense to them, ways that impact their lives, and ways that will really help them going forward. Because as Michael just mentioned, it's all about prevention and supporting our communities in ways that are helpful. Next. One of the ways that we want to do that is in launching our clinical trial finder. We are so excited for this launch. What this new clinical trial finder will do is it will be a tool that will allow our community to be able to find trials that make sense for them. As you'll see later on, through access to information from clinicaltrials.gov as well as NCI data, we are able to put our community in contact with information for clinical trials that are based on their tumor type, that are based on geography, and that can really help pinpoint clinical trials that can have an impact on their care going forward. So we are absolutely thrilled to launch this trial finder. And I am so excited for you to see all of the great work that we've been doing to make sure that you have the information that will be helpful to you. What you'll find in this presentation today is useful information on clinical trials in general, and then specifically about this trial finder and how it can help you. So I hope that you truly find this helpful to you. With that, I'll turn it over to Kevin.
All right, thank you, Patrice. And Michael, appreciate the introduction. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Laura Porter, who is the medical advisor and senior patient advocate for the Colon Cancer Alliance. Dr. Laura will cover what clinical trials are and what they are not. And she will finish with how the new Colon Cancer Alliance Clinical Trial Finder works. And Dr. Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you got it.
All right. We got it? Are we there? Okay, good. Hi, everybody. Welcome. And I want to start by saying I'm very excited about the clinical trials, clinical trial finder. I think it's going to be incredibly useful for everyone. All right. So what are clinical trials? It's a good question. So I think we'll first start with a little video that can explain it some to you.
A clinical trial is bringing a new medicine to test into a setting in cancer where it really hasn't been proven before.
Part of dealing with what we're going through is eliminating the fear of the unknown. And by going through clinical trials and others seeing that you've survived and thrived as a result of that, gives them the courage to take it on as well.
The clinical trials provided a lot more opportunity to interact with the doctors and nurses and have a lot more one-on-one monitoring on a regular basis.
I wish there would be more people that would do it. You're not thrown to the wolves. You know, they take precautions. The nursing staff, the people that do the trials are wonderful people. They're caring. You know, they make it as easy as they can for you.
You know, when you go into a clinical trial, we don't fit you with a tail and new little ears and call you a guinea pig and study you. When you actually look back, you recognize that patients on studies get kind of fussed after more than patients getting standard of care.
Clinical trials are extremely important because before treatments are used in people, the researchers have worked for many years and they've done experiments not only in cancer cells, but also in lab animals. And clinical trials are trials that research studies that are done in people. So as I was saying, most cases, the costs are covered by your insurance and the trial developer. So here's another short video.
I participated in 2 clinical trials. The first one was, I was on it for about 3 weeks. I just felt horrible. I went ahead and dropped out of it, which is my choice to do.
Once you're on a clinical trial, if you don't like what's going on, if it's not going well, you can stop anytime. And your team, your healthcare team, will offer you different approaches.
So one of the things I think that most people think when they hear clinical trials is that there are placebos. And in cancer trials, as Dr. Marshall will say in a later video, placebos are generally not used. The trials usually compare standard of care with the experimental drug. So you're not treated like a guinea pig. Another video here.
They're going to give you all of the information because they have to, because it's a trial. They have to be very open about these are the risks. They're going to give you all of the risks that have ever happened.
Before anyone gets involved in any sort of clinical trial, it's our job to explain all of those elements to an individual patient, and you will get all the information you need to lessen those fears so you really know what you're getting into.
So next I want to talk about, it's actually a very tricky subject, but I'm going to try to do it in a general way. It's genetics versus genomics. We've been hearing a lot about that in the last couple of years. So what is the difference? So genetics is testing that looks at the genes you inherited and the ones that have been with you from birth. And they look at your individual genes in isolation. And this is done either through a blood test or saliva. You know, the 23andMe, you send in a swab of your mouth and they can look at your genes. So genomics looks at your tumor's gene profile, the DNA mutations that are driving your growth of cancer, and what is different between the original tumor and the metastases. So usually a new metastases will need to be biopsied to check for the genomics of it. So what testing is recommended? I can hear something in the background there. So what testing is recommended? So the minimum genomic testing that's recommended for all stages of colorectal cancer is MSI. MSI can be done either genetic or genomic. So either on the tumor itself, or it can be done also in the blood. For metastatic disease, they want you to have the MSI, extended RAS panels, BRAF, and now HER2. HER2 is the newest molecular marker. So testing is required for all immunotherapy, clinical trials, and treatment with certain biologics. Biologics are the Vectibix and the Erbitux, the EGFR receptor inhibitors. So let's go on about the clinical trials. So there are 4 phases of clinical trials. So this is just a little graphic to show that. I'm going to go into it in a little bit detail. So the purpose of a phase 1 trial is to find a safe dose, to see how it should be given, IV or orally, and see how the treatment affects the body and also fights the cancer, and to determine which cancer it works in. You'll see that there are a lot of first phase 1 clinical trials, and all patients may be able to enroll in them, but as the trial moves into phase 2 and 3, they may preferably want certain tumor types. So initially you can enroll to see if it's working, but it doesn't mean that you will be able to move on in the further phases. So the purpose of phase 2 is determine if the new treatment has an effect on a specific cancer. So that's when they look at, let's say, non-small cell lung cancer, for example, and to see how the treatment affects the body and fights the cancer. The enrollment is less than 100 usually. So then we get to phase 3 clinical trials, and this is to compare the new treatment or the new use of the treatment, which means, for example, now that we know that HER2 is a marker in some colon cancer patients, they're going to start looking at Herceptin, which has been used in breast cancer, but now they're going to be looking at it in colon cancer. So that's why it needs to go back into clinical trials so that it can be reviewed in the new disease. Sometimes phase 2 and or 3 will be only looking at specific cancers, whereas in phase 1, as I said, they look at many cancers. So in this enrollment is 100 to several thousand. And then there's a phase 4, which you don't hear about very often. And the purpose of the phase 4 trial is to examine long-term safety and effectiveness in different patients. They look for any long-term or late side effects. This takes place after it's FDA approved and already on the market. It's much less common than phases 1 through 3, and I've not seen anywhere you can actually enroll in them. So they're following patients that have been on the first 3 phases of the trial for any further side effects. Next video.
I think one of the hardest elements in deciding about clinical trials is a type of clinical trial called the randomized trial. What this means is that there's a standard approach, and then there's a new approach that's being tested. And instead of us getting to pick which one of those you go on, a computer somewhere flips a coin and you get either A or B. It's important that patients enter into randomized trials because we don't really know if a new treatment's better than the old without randomization. Now, what I think a lot of folks overlap with that is placebo. Now, almost never, I shouldn't say never, but almost never are there placebos in cancer clinical trials. It's usually treatment A versus treatment B. If there's ever a placebo, it wouldn't be in place of a known effective treatment.
So clinical trials are being done in a new way. They are being done what's called a basket trial, and I'll make this pretty simple. So if you look at this picture, this person, this person, this person, they all have these little stars, which means that they all have the same mutation, whether they have lung, thyroid, colorectal, or sarcoma. So they go into the same basket. So they will be getting the same drug, and it will be looking at how each of these people is affected by this drug. So The trials are being done based on genetic variants or mutations, not on the tumor type. This is where the genomic study is so important. The biggest trials of this type are the NCI Match and the ASCO Taper trial, which you can find information actually on the next page. I'm going to show you the one after this. I just like these colors on this one for the basket trial, so you can see how they just put people in different piles based on their tumor markers. So now we're going to talk about our new clinical trial finder. So you can go to the website, ccalliance.org. I'm sure that there are links everywhere, and you want to click on Find Clinical Trials. So it's under, it's under Get Information, Clinical Trials, and then Find Clinical Trials. Then once you click on that, they'll come up with the 10 most promising trials. And these are just arbitrary trials that, for example, the Taper trial is the #1 trial, and that's because it has the most variability in what is looked at there. So this is where you want to enter the stage, whether you're MSS or MSI, if you know it. If you don't know it, that's okay. Molecular profile, KRAS wild type, KRAS mutant, BRAF mutant, and HER2, or if you don't know. Now, as things progress for the colon cancer and more markers are discovered, this will be more comprehensive. So you can pick your phases, what kind of treatment, and all lines of therapy. So the next thing you do is you can click on Taper, for example, the first one, and that will take you to the Smart Patient site, where you will see the testing, the Taper information, and it goes on and it talks about all of the information on Taper. So what I want to bring your attention to is this. So we have ask about this trial. So if you click on Ask My Doctor, oops, sorry, wrong one. Let's try this again. So if you want to join in a conversation, so other people who have been on the trial or who are talking about the trial, you click on Start a Conversation, or you can sign in. So either of those will take you to this page. So what you want to do is you want to enter your email address and a password and then sign in. What this does is it will allow you to follow the trials that you mark. It will give you your own user identification, and it will also allow you to ask the Smart Patients community or start a conversation. So you can search on it and see how many people are talking about the Taper trial or any of the other trials. So let's say you want to ask your doctor about this trial. What you will do is you'll click on Ask My Doctor, and that takes you to the information up here about the trial. So you enter your name and you just follow this all down, and you enter a personal note. You can either print it or you can send it to your doctor with the information about the trial. The other option is Ask the Trial Team. So you click on the trial team, and that takes you to the information about who the trial team is. And so it's this person here, and then it gives you, if there's a phone number or the contact information, and then you can enter your name and everything there also. And then the third option is Ask the Colon Cancer Alliance. So when you click on this, it takes you to a screen that's similar to the Ask Your Doctor or Ask the Trial Team, and you enter all the information, and then you send it off, and you will get a response. So I know that's a lot of information, and but this is I really am looking forward to people using this and letting us know what the kinks or the bugs are, so we can work them out. But I really am excited about this tool, and I think that it will be incredibly useful for our community. I also want to say that I got this from NCI, and I think it's incredibly important. Clinical trials are the key to making progress against cancer. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Kevin.
Thank you, Dr. Laura. And let's get the PowerPoint back up here. And it's at this time I'd like to introduce Cynthia, who will share her story. It's my pleasure to introduce Cynthia, who is a colon cancer survivor who was diagnosed in October 2007 at the age of 45 with advanced stage 4 colon cancer and was given 1 year to live. She's doing really good now, and in her 3-year period beginning in early 2015, she began 3 clinical trials. And Cynthia, we're going to hear your wonderful story at this time. Cynthia?
Hello.
There you go.
Great. Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Cynthia Heath, and I must say clinical trials, my overall experience has been wonderful. Over the last 3 years, I began immunotherapy clinical trial in early 2015 after the standard treatment had no impact when I had a recurrence. And as you can see from the slide, I began interleukin 12, which was an injection in my belly every 2 weeks. And then in 2016 of March, which was a year later, it was determined that the IL-12 was not working, that there was some tumor growth in my pelvis, also some tumors in my chest that were stable. So I needed a new plan. So I then began another clinical trial, also immunotherapy, which was interleukin 8. This was determined that it could possibly attack the tumors from a different direction. And this clinical trial was actually via infusion. In October 2016, I celebrated being a 9-year survivor. And then in November, the company that was sponsoring the IL-8 drug was sold to another company, and that trial abruptly ended. So I collaborated with my oncologist, who was Dr. John Marshall at Georgetown, and also the team at the National Institutes of Health, where I would receive my clinical trial treatment to determine the next steps. So in December of 2016, I actually started another immunotherapy clinical trial called CV301, which is a drug in combination with nivolumab immunotherapy vaccine, and that is by way of an injection to my arm. We alternate arms every 2 weeks. And what I have determined is, in just talking with both my oncologist and the oncologist at NIH, is that sometimes chemo will preclude you from participating in some of the clinical trials. So you have to meet certain requirements to participate in a clinical trial. And this is now April 2017, and I've received 6 treatments of CV301, and so far so good. The side effects from all 3 of these clinical trials have been very mild side effects, ranging from at the site of the injection, for example, I had redness and some swelling, a little pain, itching, but again, an amount of 3 to 4 days, it would just fade away. Also some flu-like symptoms, but nothing that I needed any medications for. So I think clinical trials are definitely worthwhile. I totally agree with Dr. Laura's presentation, and it has been a wonderful experience thus far for me. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Kevin.
All right, thank you, Cynthia. That was really important for a lot of people to hear, and we're glad that you shared your story, because a lot of folks just don't understand how to get into it, what they can expect, and having you here tonight to talk about those challenges, and in many cases they're not as big a challenges as a lot of people think. So having you here to share your experiences is totally invaluable, and for everybody online, we now have quite a bit of time for some questions. As always, our webinars are intended to be interactive. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and start taking some of the questions electronically. To submit a question, please click on the small plus sign on your control panel next to the word questions. And those control panels are on the right side of your screen. And then type your question in and go ahead and hit enter. And then I will see those and I will sort through those and I'll ask the panelists the very questions that are entered. If we can't get to your question, we'll do everything we can to respond to you via email when we get done. So go ahead and start submitting some of those questions, and we will have one that came in right now, and it has to do with a particular trial that is in phase 1. So I'm not sure if Dr. Laura, you're familiar with this or not, but it has to do with there's a new combo immunotherapy BMS Bristol Myers Squibb trial in phase 1. It's already enrolled 531 patients, which is a really big number. How is such a high number possible in phase 1? Any thoughts?
Wow, that's a good question. I don't know. Maybe I mean, everywhere I looked said that the phase 1 trials are supposed to be small, but maybe they had such a good response that they are enrolling more patients. They also do combined trials, so sometimes they're phase 1, 2, or phase 2, 3 trials.
I wonder if it's possible that you think it might have such a large study group because it might be being offered in multiple locations, possibly, or
Yes, it could be that, but it usually isn't. They usually have a set amount of patients that they're going to enroll. So
very good, and we'll keep our eye on that one. Anytime we have that large number of folks in a study group for phase 1, it's going to be interesting to see how it turns out. Got a question here from someone who likes to know, and I think I already know the answer, but we'll let the panel answer this, is how do folks pay for these clinical trials? Does insurance cover them, or is their participation covered through another mechanism?
Cynthia, do you wanna take that?
Yes, actually, I am currently in a clinical trial at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, and there is no cost to me. Of course, I do travel back and forth. I drive. I live in Bowie, Maryland, so the drive is about could be an hour because of the heavy traffic. But again, there is no cost to me. The people there at NIH are they are just the most supportive folks. And again, along with my oncologist, who is Dr. John Marshall, I keep in contact with him even while I'm on the clinical trial. He keeps in contact with the doctors and oncologists at NIH. And so it's really quite well organized. And again, just being in the system should new drugs become available in case one doesn't work. And again, I've been on 3 different treatments thus far. And I just think it's the best place to be in case, it's good to have those tools in your toolbox when you're fighting cancer, especially late stage cancer. So it's been wonderful. And again, there's no cost, through the clinical trials at the National Institutes of Health.
Okay, thank you very much. For any additional thoughts, Dr. Laura? If not, I have another question here about tumor testing.
Okie doke.
I have a question here, and we all know that tumor testing is really important for primary treatment. Question is, how important is it to know your MSS and MSI status relative to your tumors for clinical trials, and is it important to know your metastatic tumor biomarkers done not just on the primary tumor, but on your metastatic tumor, not only for your primary treatment, but also if you're looking for a clinical trial? How important is it to get the biomarkers and your statuses known?
Well, I first want to say that there are a lot of companies out there that are, next gen sequencing and, Foundation One, a lot of different companies that are advertising that they will test your tumor. What I think is the most expeditious thing to do is to wait and not get it done right away. So if you're interested in a clinical trial, what you can do is contact them, the clinical trial place, and they will tell you what you need to do and where you need to get it done. You can talk to your doctor about getting the testing done. As far as the MSS, MSI, it's extremely important because it is one of the recommended guidelines through ASCO and through NCCN to have that testing done on everyone with colorectal cancer. And as far as treatment is concerned, it is recommended that if you are MSI high, which is only 4% of patients that have colorectal cancer are MSI high, but they respond to the immunotherapy, the Opdivo, et cetera. So it's extremely important to, let me just say that I went to a patient advocate steering committee meeting at NCI last year. And one of the things that was talked about at that meeting was one of the researchers, one of the doctors there said that he believes that eventually immunotherapy will be used as first line and chemotherapy will be used as second, third, and fourth line. So we're almost going that way for MSI high tumors. So it's important to get that done.
What happens if your Mets, particularly your lung Mets, are too small to be tested? How do you get that information then?
Well, I mean, if it's too small to be tested, then it can't be tested.
Right.
I think back a few years ago when I did the ASCO, I think it was either ASCO or ASCO GI, and I talked about how the tumors change. That's why some of them become resistant to chemo that worked before. And so even new Mets have a different profile and molecular makeup than the original tumor had. So that's why they recommend that, so if you have a recurrence and you're interested in a clinical trial, you'll need to get that recurrence tested.
And is there a minimum requirement for measurement of that tumor? I mean, is there a minimum sample size that the clinical trials call for?
I think it's based on each individual trial. I mean, honestly, I'm sure that there's an amount that they can't test, but as far as what that is, I don't know. So.
And somebody would like to know, how do you get that genetic testing done in order to determine if a trial is applicable to you? Do you have to get that done through your primary treatment team, your oncologist?
I would think so, or you would contact the clinical trial site. So, for example, the ASCO taper trial and the NCI match trial, they are looking at a number of different, I think it's 17 or 20 different mutations. So if you contact them, they can tell you who to contact to get the tumor tested. And you need to go through your doctor to get that done.
And and are the tumor tests then covered by insurance? It seems like it should be because it's part of your primary treatment.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, yeah, it should be covered by the insurance. As far as how much of the test is covered, some tests look at maybe 5 different markers. Other tests look at 120. Now, it's up to the insurance company which ones they want to cover. So, but I do believe that most of the tumor testing is covered, especially now that there are available treatments for it.
What happens if there's a trial you're interested in and it's not near you, but it is with a drug that may be already FDA approved? Is it possible to get that drug through a compassionate care through your doctor, or is it only then going to be available through a clinical trial?
Wow, this is a very tricky, good question.
Got a pot full of very, very dialed-in attendees this evening.
Yes, we do, don't we? So here's the thing. You can ask for compassionate care, all right? You can also ask for the trial to be extended in your area. So that's another thing, is that they can open up trial sites. Sometimes they can open up trial sites in different areas. So the other thing is that the problem with compassionate care is that it's not in a controlled setting. And, so if everybody wanted to go on, let's say Opdivo, we find that Opdivo is possibly working. And so half the patients just get it because they want it for compassionate care. It's going to throw off the results as to whether or not it's really working. And the follow-up is not going to be as accurate. So it is a double-edged sword there.
Interesting. I have another question here. Hang on, it's a repeat of the original one here. So if you don't see a trial that affects your particular trial, what should you do? What if you're looking for a particular trial and regarding your particular situation, what are your options at that point?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
For example, if they have different variations of their mutations and they type them into an app, and they type in all their genomics on MSS, KRAS wild, all the phases, nothing comes up. So, but then when they modify the search to KRAS mutant, they get a lot of hits. How does a layperson know that they're looking at the right trial and the right trials for them?
Well, my hope is that eventually, once the clinical trial finder, once we figure out, what works and what doesn't work, and it progresses, is that they can sit down with a path report or their, next gen sequencing report, what the genomic report, and put all that information in, and hopefully it will populate trials for them.
Okay.
So there are trials that some are extremely specific. And I just want to say that I went through and I checked all the labels on these trials, and some of them are extremely specific. Like you have to have not been on Erbitux before. You have to have this mutation, not that mutation. And others are just, usually they're the earlier phase trials, but they don't have such strict inclusion or exclusion criteria. So, you know, part of the clinical trial finder is to give you a smaller number than the 200 or 400 that are out there, to take out the ones that you absolutely don't qualify for. It doesn't mean that the ones that populate for you, you do qualify for. It's just that there's a better chance than the ones that are excluded. Because if you get 200 trials, it's going to be overwhelming.
Right.
But if you get 10 trials, that's a more manageable number to take to your doctor and discuss.
And absolutely work with your clinician team to find out which one's best for you. So perfect. I had a clarification here on that one trial with the 531 patients. Apparently, they're still not going to officially enroll until April 28th, but the estimated enrollment is already up to 531. And the person with the comment was just curious that there must be some radical changes to some of the phase 1 trial design for this new combo immunotherapy. So those changes must really be and fully vetted and allow a much larger sample size.
Well, you know, that's a good point, especially for the immunotherapy trials that are looking at, you know, like all solid tumors, for example. So like the taper, let's talk about ASCO taper. It's looking at all solid tumors. So if they're only going to enroll 30 people, which tumors are they going to be looking at? You know, that's going to be a very small number for, let's say, 30 different tumor types. So, and they also have 17 different drugs markers that they're looking at. So it would make sense on these larger basket trials that the numbers are larger than the initial clinical trials. So yes, that makes sense.
Okay, and I have one question here, and we're starting to run out of time here, so this will probably be our last one. But this question I've heard before, and so it seems to be somewhat common. And could you address this particular thought here, that should you wait for first-line treatment to fail before seeking a clinical trial, even if the success of the standard of care is not very high? I mean, we hear that a lot. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's another thing. Going through all the clinical trials over the last several weeks, some of them require that you've been through every standard of care. I mean, some require that you have been through 3 different lines of standard of care before you can enroll. Those are usually the trials that are looking at experimental treatments. For example, most of the trials, many of them will require that you have had at least first line, and for colorectal cancer, usually second line. And the reason for that is because we know that first line and second line, it's either FOLFIRI or FOLFOX. Now, I'm only talking about metastatic disease at this point. So, because most of these trials that I'm talking about are for metastatic. So, most require that you've had first and second line treatment. There are some trials that want you to be treatment naive. So there is a number of trials right now that are looking at regorafenib or Stivarga in a number of different ways. So one of the requirements of that is that you cannot have already been on it. So You know, I tried when I was tagging these trials, I tried to make it so that it was pretty clear about whether it's first line or second line. And when you click on a trial, the tags will come up and you can see if it's first line, second line, or third line and beyond. So, you know, it's going to take some playing around with the trial finder, but I really think that it's going to be fairly clear.
Okay.
But as far as what's the best thing to do, I say there's never a bad time to look up a clinical trial. You know,
Knowledge is power and key.
Well, yeah, and also, so let's say your treatment is working, you know, or this is your third line of treatment or your second line of treatment. Find out what else is available out there for you, so you're not scrambling at the you know, last minute to try to figure out what you can do. So.
All right, very good. As always, Dr. Laura, appreciate that. Your intimate knowledge of these trials by virtue of a lot of the committees you work on and is greatly appreciated. And I'd also like to thank everyone in attendance tonight for being here. But we are just about out of time for this evening. And as a reminder, all of you in attendance will receive a follow-up email tomorrow night with a link to where you'll find a recording of this webinar. Where we park it online, you'll get a link and you can watch it again and get the different. You can watch at your leisure the different slides. If you have any support questions that you would like to ask in a more personal one-on-one setting, you can always speak directly with one of our certified patient and family support navigators on our helpline, and you can call them at 877-422-2030, or you could also visit them online for a live chat at ccalliance.org. I'd like to, again, thank all of our presenters for this evening. We value your time and appreciate you being here. We thank everybody for joining us. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, Boston Biomedical, Bayer, Genentech, Taiho Oncology, and Smart Patients for their generous and invaluable support in making this important patient education webinar possible. As a reminder, this webinar is recorded and you'll get that link tomorrow, so look for it tomorrow night. You'll also get a link to a short 2-minute survey to let us know how we did. If you have any questions regarding the webinar, please feel free to email me at kbergerson@ccalliance.org. On behalf of the entire Colon Cancer Alliance team, thank you for attending this evening. I hope you found it informative and value-added. Have a good evening and take care, everyone.